So let's look at an application of elasticity. So one really important application is going to be excise taxes. And so as you're aware, the government, whether that's municipal, provincial, federal, or whatever, taxes goods and services. And they use these taxes to pay for things like roads, public schooling, national defense, etc., etc. So let's write that down. So the government taxes some goods and services to pay for things like public school, parks, playgrounds, things like that, parks, national defense, roads. So they tax goods and services to raise money to pay for these things. They can put taxes on buyers or sellers. So they can tax the production of this good, or they can tax the buying of this good. And so what we're going to concentrate on are excise taxes or per unit taxes. So we're going to concentrate on per unit taxes. Per unit taxes. So taxes where you have to pay a certain amount of money for each good that you buy. So it's not like a percentage of the price or anything like that. It's like every time you go in and you buy whatever, a widget, you have to pay $1 to the government. Or every time you produce a widget, if the tax is on the sellers, every time you produce one or you sell one, you have to pay $1. So we're really going to concentrate, and this is supposed to say concentrate, on these per unit taxes. So let's start thinking about how these taxes, these per unit taxes, are going to affect markets. And we can look at what's going to happen if this tax is put on the seller side or on the buyer side. It's going to turn out it doesn't matter which side you put the tax on as the government. The result in the market will be the same. But let's take a look. So let's imagine we have this market, price on the y-axis, quantity on the x like usual, and we're going to draw one more below it as well. All right, so we might start off by thinking about this market in equilibrium, so our supply and demand curves. So we have some equilibrium, and let me do that in a different color. And let's imagine this current equilibrium price is $10 and the quantity is 500 here. It's going to be the same for this market. Down here, up here we'll think about what the effect of a tax on the buyers is, and then down here we can think about what happens to this graph if we put a tax on the sellers. But let's just imagine, so this is P star is again $10, and the quantity is 500. Now, for this graph up here, let's imagine a $1.50 tax on buyers. So now every time that you go, let's say this is pizza, every time you go in and you buy a pizza, there's like a little till over there that you have to give $1.50 to. So that's the idea here. Every time you buy a pizza, you have to pay this tax to the government, to like Queen's government or something like that for $1.50. Let's think about what that does to our demand curve. Well, we were buying 500 before at this equilibrium price of $500, so that was what the market was buying. in order to still buy 500 of these pizzas, if we had to pay this $1.50 in tax, the price of pizza would have to lower by $1.50, right? And that's going to be true for any quantity along this x-axis. To continue to want to buy the same amount of pizza, the price would have to be $1.50 lower after we institute this tax. So what does that mean? Well, it means this whole demand curve is shifting down by $1.50. So this whole thing is shifting down by $1.50. So again, the reasoning there is to continue to want to buy, let's say, 500 pizzas. The price we used to be willing to pay for 500 pizzas was $10. Well, now that we have to pay this $1.50 in tax to still want to buy 500 pizzas, the price better be $8.50, right? Because we're going to have to put another $1.50 in the Queen's government till. So that's the logic here. All right, so now we're going to find out where so this is the new demand curve. So this is like the tax demand curve here. And so now when you go into the store, this is how much you give the cashier for your pizza. So this is going to be the price that the amount of money the store actually gets to keep. This is going to be the quantity. Let's say it goes down by 50, so it's $4.50. We can use algebra in a few minutes to actually solve for these numbers. We're just kind of exploring this theoretically now. So you go into the store and let's say now the price is $9.50. Notice that the price hasn't gone down exactly by $1.50. It only goes down by part of that. And then we need to figure out how much we have to pay. Well, if we have to pay the store $9.50 when we buy our pizza, and we have to give $1.50 to the government, that's going to mean the actual price that we pay as consumers is now $11. So notice there's two different prices now in equilibrium. So we have this quantity of $4.50. Notice that we put a tax in it, the quantity is going to go down. We have a price, PS, the price the sellers get. So that's, you walk into the store, your pizza parlor, you have to give them $9.50 now to buy the pizza. So that's how much they get. But then the effective price you're paying is you give them $9.50 and then you have to give $1.50 to the government. So in essence, you're paying $11. So this is what happens when you have a tax on the buyers. The whole demand curve is shifting down. We have this new, we see where this new demand curve intersects this old supply curve, and that's the price the sellers get. Notice that's less than the old equilibrium price. Now the buyers pay that price to the pizza parlors, but then have to pay $1.50 more to the government. And so their effective price, which we're labeling PB for buyer's price or price for buyers, is $11. So notice the difference between these two is the size of the tax. Okay, so that's how it's working for if we put a tax on buyers. Now imagine in this other scenario, imagine a $1.50 tax on sellers. So we can use the same logic as we were thinking about before, but now we're going to apply it to sellers. So now every time, let's say now you're the proud owner of a pizza parlor. Now every time you sell a pizza, you have to give $1.50 to the government or the Queen's government or whoever. So we want to think about what effect that has on our supply curve. So at an equilibrium price of $10, we were willing to supply 500 pizzas because we were getting $10 per pizza. Well, now we have to pay the government $1.50 in tax every time we sell one. So to be willing to sell 500 pizzas now, we need to get $11.50 for each pizza we sell. So it's the same kind of logic we used here about the demand curve shifting down, but now the supply curve is shifting up. So now this whole supply curve, I'll label it, well, let's say S tax. Now this whole supply curve is shifting up by the size of this tax, which in this case is $1.50. So that's the distance between these two supply curves. It's like vertically shifted up by $1.50 because to be able to still, the logic behind it is to still be willing to supply 500 pizzas, we need to get $1.50 more per pizza because we need to pay the government $1.50 every time we sell one. So now we can analyze this new market just like we did above there. So now here's the equilibrium, new supply curve, old demand curve, 450. Notice it's the same number. I just guess I didn't draw the shifts the same way, but it's the same numbers. Now where these two curves intersect, the new supply curve and the old demand curve, now this is what buyers have to pay when they go into the pizza parlor. They go up to the counter, they have to pay $11 to you, the owner of this pizza parlor, but you don't get to keep that whole $11. You take that $11, then you have to take $1.50 of that and give it to the government. So in essence, the price that you're actually receiving for your pizza, PS, is going to be $9.50. Again, the difference between these two is the tax. Well, notice these numbers are the same between these two graphs. Doesn't matter if we put the tax on the buyers or the sellers. Doesn't matter which one. The resulting effect on the market is the same. Because who ends up, what determines PB and PS is actually going to be about elasticity. And so it's going to turn out whoever has, more or less elasticity or more or less elastic, relatively elastic supply and demand curves, that's going to determine who kind of has to pay more of the tax or all of the tax. So let's take a look at that. So as we just saw, it doesn't matter if you put the tax on the buyers or the seller, the kind of resulting market is the same. So let's just draw out a market and talk about these different elements. So here's our price and quantity of our pizza market. Here's that supply curve. Here's that demand curve. We had 500 pizzas sold, an equilibrium price of $10 before this tax was instituted. And we saw with this $1.50 tax, it didn't matter if it was on the buyers or the sellers in terms of what happened to the price the sellers got and the price the buyers paid. What all it's doing is creating a wedge between buyers and sellers. So it's creating this tax wedge between buyers and sellers. That should be a straight line. And that determines the new quantity in the market. So I guess that was 450 in our example. The bottom of this tax wedge is the price that the sellers get. So in this case, in our example, was $9.50. The top of this tax wedge is what the buyers have to pay. I guess I should move that over a bit. Hopefully it's not too messy on your screen. And that was $11 in our example. So notice that the amount that the buyers pay is different than the amount the sellers get. And that difference is exactly the tax, right? So this is that equal to that tax, which is $1.50 in this case. The tax was $2, the distance, the length of this wedge would be $2. It would just be further out here. Okay, so now let's talk about burden of the tax. So tax burden. In essence, this is saying, well, who's paying for this tax? So let's think about the buyer situation. After the tax, buyers pay $11 for their pizza. Before the tax, buyers paid $10 for their pizza. So they're paying $1 of the tax. Now we could use the same logic for the sellers. After tax, sellers get $9.50 for every time they sell a pizza. And before the tax, should be sellers, sorry. Before the tax, the sellers got $10. Well, now they're getting 50 cents less. So now, when we look at the burden of the tax, the buyers have a larger burden. They're paying more of this tax. They're paying $1 of this $1.50 tax, while the sellers are only paying 50 cents of this tax. So the tax is not shared evenly between buyers and sellers. And again, doesn't matter if we actually put the tax on the buyers or sellers. Either way, buyers are going to pay $1 of the tax, and sellers are going to pay 50 cents of that tax. And so who has the bigger burden is going to end up depending on elasticities. And in particular, whoever has the more inelastic curve is going to pay more of the tax. Let's take a look.